everybody, welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. It's me and Nate. It's DadChat. Nate, it is middle of February. How are things in England? We just had Mardi Gras here. I don't know how big of a deal Mardi Gras is literally anywhere else.
Well, I mean, Mardi Gras is, part of Catholicism and, what is it, Lent and all that, right?
Right. But I don't know if there's an Anglican.
Not that I'm aware of, but I'm not super familiar with Anglicanism. My dad, his family were Episcopalians, so American Anglicans, basically. But I'm not 100% sure. I don't recall there being anything like Mardi Gras, Carnival, anything like that at all. I think it's a Catholic thing, and that's why I think it's New Orleans, French colony city, right. Very Catholic, countries that are super Catholic in Southern Europe do stuff for Carnival and things like that. Like, I just don't, I'm not aware of it. I have not heard and I'm not the world's most connected person right now, but I have not heard a thing about it here.
Okay.
So
yeah, St. Louis is the second largest Mardi Gras celebration in America, right behind New Orleans, obviously.
New Orleans, yeah.
We too are a French town on the Mississippi, and we love mangling French words. It's one of our favorite things to do is to fuck up somebody else's language.
I'm just laughing at the idea of people being like, hell yeah, let's go to Mardi Gras in St. Louis. I'm sure February in Missouri will be great.
It was, you know what? Look, so I've only been to one Mardi Gras here in St. Louis. It was right after I got back from Afghanistan, so I was freshly like 21. And it was a beautiful day because, look, in the Midwest, sometimes February in the Midwest is nice. Like, roll a dice.
In the southern Midwest, yes.
Roll a die, and you're not going to get this in Minneapolis, but, you're
in Milwaukee, in Duluth. Yeah. That's not happening, no.
Yeah, but in St. Louis, in Indiana, you roll a die in February. It comes, every once in a while it comes up with a 6 and you get a day that's above 40 degrees. And
I mean, it's getting worse, obviously, or rather climate change being what it is, that winters are far milder. I mean, my parents said that, my parents have moved to Minneapolis and they said that that they had almost no snow this winter. Now, I don't know if that's still the case, but definitely, like, the last time they spoke to me about the weather, they had said that, like, and their friends who are like Minnesota natives said that it's one of the, like, a freak winter for them in the sense that, like, this is just unbelievable. But in Indiana growing up, a good day in February was pretty rare, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. I remember St. Louis every once in a while gets those 60-degree days. And then we also get those days where it's, in April, you get like 4 inches of snow. So, it's
you've seen The Wire, you've seen the whole thing with Idris Elba's
40-degree day.
40-degree day. Yeah. It was I got to be honest with you. Having watched that series, binged it like right before I got out of the army. I was in Korea in like my last month active duty. I didn't look on Wikipedia. I didn't want to spoil it. I didn't look at anything about the cast. I just watched it and enjoyed it. And I think someone spoiled what happens to Omar. I'm going to do spoiler alerts just in case, like, not going to reveal shit, just in case someone out there hasn't watched, right. In the same way that, like, that I had this ruined for me that we haven't finished it yet, but Cynthia and I were working through The Sopranos, which I had never seen. And that's getting into by the end of season 2, I was like, Sopranos meme pages, and it was too late.
Yeah. Before
Cynthia warned me, like, no one cares about spoiler alerts for a show that came out 25 years ago. So, like, it's going to spoil shit. And that 100% happened.
I'm having that issue with the show that I'm watching right now. But go finish your Wire tangent.
The Wire thing I'd say is that I had no idea that Idris Elba was British. I had no idea the actor playing Stringer Bell was British. I think that Dominic West playing McNulty, I was like, that guy is not an American. I can't remember the guy who plays Mayor Carcetti, but I was like, I don't think he's not American either. I'm like, I don't think he's American, but I'm not sure. But McNulty, everything about McNulty, it's to a cop who dropped out of college his freshman year because he got his girlfriend pregnant, who grew up working class in Baltimore, just wouldn't talk like that. His accent is too neutral, like American. But Idris Elba, he doesn't sound like a dude from Baltimore. He sounds like a guy from Brooklyn.
Yeah.
But I met guys in Brooklyn who sounded just like that. And especially the 40-degree day speech is one of those things where it's so good. The delivery is so good. And I can't quote it because he uses the N-word, but it's extremely fucking funny. Like, you watch the show, you'll understand entirely. But yeah, I had no idea. When I found out I was like, man.
The casting people also didn't know he was British. Like, he came in, he was just like, I read an interview where he was just like, I couldn't come in with
my accent.
Yeah. Because, you see somebody completely different. And now, though, Idris Elba is so badass that even with the British accent, I still wouldn't want to fuck with. He's like the one guy that makes a British accent sound tough.
I mean, I think there's been people who have done that. I mean, Idris Elba, I can't remember exactly where he's from, but clearly hearing his accent, he's from Southern England. I think he's from London, but I can't remember. And I would say something I find interesting too about this is I know of a similar phenomenon where when they were casting House, Hugh Laurie was shooting a movie in like Sri Lanka or somewhere in India. He couldn't come to the audition. So he sent in like, it was far long enough ago that it was the tech involved was shooting a video, I think, on VHS. It might have been a digital camera, but I think it was VHS in like his hotel room in wherever in South Asia he was. And he just like was doing the line and everything. And the director was like, this guy is great. Like, man, we really need more American actors like this dude. This guy's got range. And it's funny for me because I grew up watching Blackadder,
yeah.
And so I knew Hugh Laurie immediately. And I was like, wait, what the fuck? How is that man doing that? How is he?
When I first saw House too, because I had the same thing. I grew up with Hugh Laurie. Oh,
Chilly Ho! Yeah.
Bladder.
So, bloody good show. Yeah.
He's super.
Hurrah!
And then to see him grizzled and addicted to pain pills and be like, man, I don't like anybody here. It was, I mean, they did well hiring him because obviously he's a fantastic actor to be able to do all of that. But
yeah, Damian Lewis is okay. Hugh Laurie is good. Idris Elba's insanely good. Dominic West isn't bad, but I think specifically McNulty, the thing that I always tell people about this is like in season 2 in the beginning when he's been taken off being a beat cop, or being on the, being fucking narcotics or homicide or whatever. I can't remember what his specific, I think he was homicide, but I can't remember. When he's been taken off that and he's just doing the boat patrols in the port of Baltimore, there's a guy, his partner on the boat is an old white cop who's not really an actor. He's actually like a dude from Baltimore and like they cast him to be, he's got the accent in real life that a guy of McNulty's background would have.
Mm-hmm.
And you hear the difference between those two and you're just like, okay, yeah, see like, it is an American accent. He is doing an American accent well. It's not like Johnny Lee Miller and fucking Hackers where it's just like Scotland is just leaking out of his ears. But because I was 11 when I saw that movie and even I was like, that man is not American. But it's the context of the character.
Yeah, I'm going to say I work with two people that are one's from Boston and one's from Salem, they're very close. And one of them has the most Dunkin' Donuts accent that you could ever hear. He is and he knows it and he jokes about it too. And the other one does not at all. He has no accent whatsoever. And I am confused. Like, look, I know in St. Louis we have regional dialects. Like there is definitely a difference between a South Side and a North Side person. Like just in the way they speak, but like it is very clear. Like you just think everybody from Boston is going to have this cartoonish accent, and then I've got this other guy who would not even be able to tell he was from Massachusetts unless he told me. It's like, yeah, Dunkin's, it's fine.
I mean, I think that's kind of also like a class thing too, because like the specifically the like working class accent in Massachusetts in general and in New England. I mean, because Cynthia's accent, she kind of had to suppress it. It does come out periodically. The Rhode Island accent is different, but it's of a similar vein, in that regard. And I mean, you'll hear that like that because we have this kind of standard voice in America and more people have it, than here in the UK, you have kind of standard broadcast voice, but that's not really how people talk. Like there are people who talk close to it and there's kind of what you might describe as like close to a sort of neutral Southern English accent. But by and large, people don't talk like that.
Right.
And when you talk about like BBC presenter voice, basically, no one. There are very few people who I could imagine would speak that way in their normal speaking voice. And if they did, they like had the world's most traumatic childhood, and it was just like beaten into them.
Yeah, it is. It's the non-regional Midwest dictation kind of thing where you've purged any kind of twang, any kind of like everything you say is said as if it was a voice-to-text simulator.
I mean, because basically in Indiana, it's like, yeah, there's the class different stuff. Things can be vaguely Southernish. There's, lots of things but we don't really have a distinct accent. And, I've heard stories of people who went to school, like one of my professors in grad school said when she went to the CUNY Graduate Center, that they literally made the PhD students who were from New York City take a elocution class that was taught like by someone from Iowa, because they were like, you're not graduating from the City University of New York with a
sounding
PhD,
like that,
sounding basically having a Bronx Jewish accent. We refuse to allow it. And so like they made them take those lessons. So of course, yeah, the Midwest becomes the blueprint. But Northern Indiana, you sound like Mike Ditka. Southern Indiana, you sound like that guy from the famous, 16-plus-year-old viral video about this fucking Obama's going to ban flavored dip. Like, it's just, that's the range we've got. We've got the people descended, communities settled by people who got there on the Ohio River in like the 1700s. And they're mostly like Scotch-Irish ex-Ulster planters, generic British Isles fucking people. And then the further north you get, the later the settlement was, and more of them came by boat through post-Erie Canal being constructed, and they're probably German. And then closer into Chicago also, you get lots and lots of like Baltic, Eastern European people as well.
Yeah.
So you're like, people who are, Poles and Lithuanians, Estonians, Latvians. There's so many, like Chicago famously had and still does have a big Baltic community of, like Mike Ditka I think he's Lithuanian, or he was Lithuanian, but like I've met people in the army who were from Chicago, and they were like, from that part of the world. Tall, burly, look like they were built to fucking cut down trees in the winter, that kind of thing.
It's always staggering to me because, I live in a small city that does have some, it does have like its ethnic areas, ethnic groups where there's, a certain amount. There's a lot of Bosnians here. There's a lot of Hispanic people here. I live in a place that is very Hispanic driven by the 17 Mexican restaurants I have around me, and the bodega that sells Mexican Coke, which I absolutely love.
There's a Catholic church near where we live, and as a result, there's a ton of like people who are migrants who or have a migration background who live here, who are Catholic, and a lot of them are West African, but also or Central African. A lot of them are also Latin American. There's way, way more Latin Americans in South London than there were 20 years ago. And even since we've lived here, in the 6 years we've lived here, you just encounter more Latin Americans. You hear people speaking Latin American Spanish. And I think that like you see a lot of Latin American stores up on Old Kent Road now that weren't there before. And that's changing. But I think that some of it is there's a community there already. So people go to where people are going to like speak the language, and they might have places to rent and stuff, and there might be jobs. And then also like there are those community things like, chances are good. Now this is not uniform because there's a lot more Pentecostal and evangelical people in Latin America now than there used to be. But generally speaking, most people are Catholic. That's just kind of it's pretty standard.
I remember being in LA, and like my first time in LA, and I had a car and I had my daughter, and we were like driving around, and I missed a turn, and I said, I'll just get off at this next exit and turn around. Then suddenly I'm in like the Vietnamese district of LA, which is which was just like, whoa, this is way bit like, again, I'm from a small city. I'm sure the Vietnamese district has the population that my entire city does, just in LA. We have 300,000 people here in St. Louis. It's not a big spot. And it's mostly full of Midwest white people. But yeah, hitting that and it was like being in a completely different world. Not here bitching about it, obviously. It was just surprising to me that there are these, I hear about Chinatown. I know I'm a fucking off the apple truck ass Midwesterner sometime, especially when I go to the coastal cities, but it is surprising and heartening. I'm glad that, people find a place to be here.
Yeah, I've been to the Vietnamese / there's like a big Southeast Asian community in Chamblee, Georgia, outside of Atlanta. Back in like before it became kind of a white people cultural fad to eat pho, like my friend's dad was really into. He's like, "Fucking, we're gonna go get some." So that's first time I ever had pho was in Chamblee, like probably more than 20 years ago. And also there's a big Vietnamese community in Philadelphia. And so I was staying with a friend who lived pretty close to downtown, like near Rittenhouse Square. And so we just drove out to that side of Philly and got insanely hungover from the day before. So of course, pho is like the greatest thing on the planet.
Sure. When
you're hungover. I was going to say too, my LA story, I'll summarize, is very funny. I was there in 2011 because it was a stopover when we were coming back from Australia, and I was bringing this kid back who had broken his back on a jump and had to have surgery in Australia. So they gave us an overnight stay after every leg of our journey. So we flew in back to our base in Anchorage, Alaska. We had to go out of Australia from Brisbane to LA on a direct flight and then stay overnight basically by LAX. And this kid was Puerto Rican, and I was like, he was very unhappy with how things had gone down. And to cheer him up, I went and got him because he didn't like Australian food. By virtue of that, that means he didn't like British food either. And I was like, I'm going to go get him Puerto Rican food. And so I in the pre-DoorDash fucking, seamless era, I called a restaurant and I ordered it, and I said I'd be about 45 minutes. Now, Angelinos will know how fucked I am because I ordered from a Puerto Rican restaurant in North Hollywood, and I was staying in Inglewood. I was right outside of LAX. Now, the traffic, it was midday. It wasn't even bad traffic on the 405. It took me 4.5 hours.
Jesus.
Round trip. They called me 3 times asking if I was still coming. I'm like, yes, I promise. I'm sorry. I'm not from here and I'm stuck in traffic. And I was driving this, I can't remember what it was, it was some kind of Ford rental car, and it sucked. Like, it's just one of those things that had no pickup whatsoever. But even in that time, that brief period, I realized that sometimes it's better to just get off the freeway and literally go through every stop sign in a neighborhood and just go that way. Because goddamn, getting north of, thinking of my LA geography, because North Hollywood's in the valley. It's in the San Fernando Valley. It's north of the actual city. And so you have that choke point in the mountains, and it's like, oh, fuck me, dude. It was so, it was a beautiful day. That's the thing with Los Angeles. Great weather. Mm-hmm. A lot of that city, you're like, man, God has forsaken the earth. But at night, amazing going out. Daytime, the weather's incredible. But there's just things about it where I'm like, not going to go so far to say Falling Down was a documentary, but it's one of those things where you're like, living here is just going to be hard. Mm-hmm. Like, stuff's going to be annoying, and you got to drive, and everything's spread out. And like, if you want to ride a bike, you're absolutely taking your fucking life in your own hands. Like, but man, we got off topic. You were talking about Vietnamese food, and I did have a point I wanted to make, which is I find it very funny because you said St. Louis is 300,000 people.
Yeah, just
small city.
The city itself, the greater St. Louis area, is like 2.5 million. But
okay, that makes a little more sense because Indianapolis, the greater Indianapolis area, is about 1 million.
Yeah,
it's Indianapolis. I think at one point was like the 12th biggest city in America. It was actually bigger at one point in American history because there was a huge amount of natural gas there. And so in the early 20th century, like, that was driving a ton of economic growth, but the gas ran out. So until it became, biomedical center and medical research and auto parts was another one too, all that, like, and just basically the place where all the interstates connect, it kind of ceased to have a purpose, so that it missed out on that growth for a while. And so Indianapolis, I just was laughing. I'm like, man, I think it may be it is definitely metro area smaller than St. Louis. But when you said it was 300,000, I was like, damn, St. Louis only has 300,000 people and it gave us Nelly, whereas Indianapolis, it's like, we got Babyface, but he got famous in LA, and John Mellencamp, but he's actually from Seymour. He's from Southern Indiana.
Technically, Nelly's not from St. Louis. He's from University City.
Oh, well, yeah, but you guys have that thing where every fucking housing subdivision is its own town with its own mayor. Like,
so
you have like ultra redlining. Yeah, like,
yeah, so when I say St. Louis has 300,000, it is a very small group. Like the distended stomach that is our city limits, hugging the Mississippi River, and then 90 municipalities that butt up against us. That, like, any normal city would be like, no, you're just St. Louis. Why are you calling yourself Crestwood? Stop that.
Why are you Country Club Hills? No town should be called Country Club Hills.
Oh God, let's not. One day when I become dictator of the Midwest, I will finally draw the lines, and it'll be the lines of everything that's inside of the highways, highway connectors, 70 to 270 to 255. All of that is St. Louis. All the rest of you're forsaken. You will wander the earth, sad and alone, at your Red Robins and your golf clubs, and you're not allowed to come in.
We'll create a mythology that actually the earth would fall apart if the St. Louis Arch wasn't holding it together. The prime meridian will be moved from Greenwich, England, and it will be moved straight down the Mississippi in St. Louis, so the arch will bisect the earth. We'll have a new coordinate system. Yeah. Indianapolis will technically be in the Eastern Hemisphere, but I'm trying to do my math here. Joplin will be in the Eastern Hemisphere, Western Hemisphere. Joplin is west.
Joplin is west, right?
Yeah.
So the arch was actually just in the Percy Jackson TV show, which was very fun because it's the arch is actually a temple to Athena, I believe, in that whole thing, and they go up in the arch, and there's a fight up in the top of the arch. It's very exciting as a St. Louisan.
Have you ever seen the documentary The Pruitt-Igoe Myth?
Yes, I have. It's been a long time, but yeah.
Yeah, I found that really fascinating. For people who aren't familiar, it's not the easiest thing to find. I got it on iTunes, or Apple TV, I guess. But it is basically a documentary about the sort of narrative being formed in America that is now treated as received wisdom, that, public housing is always doomed to fail and it's a disaster and everything is, horrible and awful and everyone wants to get out. And it talks about what it was like in Pruitt-Igoe, which was a big project in St. Louis. Mm-hmm. And you can kind of like bifurcate its conditions and fate based on when they had to desegregate state-run housing, because there was so much opposition to desegregation that basically all the white people left.
Yep.
And the lack of maintenance, the lack of like actual care, like stuff being built into the system to make it as hard as possible for people to live there, like married families, like husbands weren't allowed to live with their families, stuff like that. Like men weren't allowed to live in this housing. And so basically, or rather married men were not. I believe unmarried men were. And it was so, you're just like, what the fuck are you thinking? You learn about this is like, that it's like it would take years to get a light bulb replaced because they just didn't care about it, and eventually got demolished. And I think one of the more fascinating details about that was there was a woman who talked about it, that she had done a PhD in sociology in the 70s, I think, the early 70s. And when she was a PhD student, she went to do field work at Pruitt-Igoe, and she was doing it from the University of Mississippi. Her family was from Mississippi. She had lots of relatives who had moved up to St. Louis because, like, if you look at the Great Migration, particularly in the middle part of the 20th century, you can see where Southern Black people migrated north typically corresponds with direct rail links from, if you were in Texas, you went to California. If you were in Mississippi, you went to Missouri, or to Minnesota, or to Wisconsin. If you were in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, you went to New York, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Boston. And this woman said the thing that she found distressing, fascinating, but also really distressing, was that like many of these women were not much younger than her, who were, 18, 19, 20, married, had kids, living in this housing project in a situation where like they were not doing well, jobs were hard to come by, things weren't great, whereas she was, because of desegregation and the opportunities that did exist at the time, was able, by staying in Mississippi, to have gone to college and then graduate school. And she's like, I'm not that much different in background than these people, but like I'm by staying in the South, this worked out for me, whereas by going north in hopes of better prospects, it's really not going well for them.
Right.
And it's just one of those things where you're like, yeah, everyone's going to want, given the opportunity to move to a place where their families have better options. But like, I think that in our story of how people like narrativize the United States, we really, really, really undersell how much just like full on white people being like, no, I'd rather not have a country than have to share it with black people. And you could make the argument that America has been non-functional since the Civil Rights Bill was passed, since the Civil Rights Act was passed, and since desegregation, because like fundamentally there are enough Americans, mostly, let's say, be honest, white Americans, who are not willing to accept the idea of any concept of legal or civil equality.
Right.
Like it's just like no one who is not white can be in a better position than me, or even the same position as me, without it being unfair or without me being offended and wanting to either burn my own house down to piss them off somehow, or to basically like create apartheid South Africa.
Yeah, there's a really good book by a guy, Walter Johnson, called The Broken Heart of America. That is the races of America really kind of starts and ebbs from St. Louis in a lot of different ways, and how like we went to Memphis a few years back, and my wife and I were just like astounded by how not stressed out everybody seems in Memphis, like where you can live in a city that is kind of small, but you've got black people and you've got white people, and everybody seems to be okay. And while in St. Louis, it's just like, I mean, we built entire highway systems through neighborhoods to bulldoze black people's houses. Like that was, and there is literally nothing that will ever take that back. Like the best thing that we can do at this point is just raise the entire city and build it without racism in mind. But like it's turned into a racism madness rune at this point, where like there's nothing that you can do because we don't have the money to do it, and we don't have the desire to do it. We don't, like, our whole north side area, which now is kind of considered the bad side of town, but it's got neighborhood names like Baden, which is a German name, and if you only have to go back, like, my father-in-law grew up in North City as, he's a well-to-do white person now, because at a certain point there was segregation, and then they said, oh, we're going to desegregate this, and all the white people went and crossed the river up into St. Charles, and now we have St. Charles, where they have the most insane fucking politicians ever come from there. But
well, I would point this out too, that my parents picked where we wound up living because my dad got assigned to Fort Benjamin Harrison in Indianapolis, which was marked for closure in the 1995 BRAC. And so by the time that my dad got, for people who aren't familiar, they do a thing every 10 years called base realignment and closure. And, post Cold War, a lot of bases, a lot of facilities got closed, and Fort Bend was one of them. And so, but when my dad's sort of period of time that he served there as his last assignment, from like 96 to like 90, early 99 or late 98, and then he retired, basically it was still there. And so my parents were like, okay, well, like pre-internet, they had to get like a sort of stats book or something they got from the library and looked at it, and they were like, okay, this place Carmel seems interesting. If we can afford a house there, then we'll plan on living in Carmel. And so that's what we wound up moving to. And what I didn't know about Carmel, because I was really a fish out of water, having been a white kid in New Mexico, and then prior to that, an American in Germany. Like, New Mexico isn't like overwhelmingly non-white, but you're just far more comfortable, far more accustomed to being in a place where there are lots and lots of Hispanic kids, and you might be in a class in school where more than half your class is Hispanic. And like, for a few months when we first got there, I went to a Catholic school, and I was one of like 2 non-Catholic kids in my 3rd grade class, and one of like 5 non-Hispanic kids in my class. Like, because, it's a Catholic school in Santa Fe, like lots and lots of people who are Catholic or Hispanic, but, and so Carmel, it took me a while to adjust to it. And, also starting middle school, like, it's sort of like bullying nexus. I didn't know what I was walking into in a lot of ways. And one of the reasons why that is because Carmel's a white flight town. Because Indianapolis is kind of the opposite of St. Louis in the sense that rather than, everyone breaking away into separate townships and cities and stuff like that, and it kind of like literally, kind of, as I understand it, etching these things out of St. Louis City. They're all part of St. Louis County, but they're not part of the city anymore. They've like seceded from the city.
Yeah, it's a whole thing in the 1800s, but yeah, it's the city left the county really, and then everything kind of broke into its own things. And in the 1800s, it was easier to have that than it is now.
Indianapolis did a thing called Unigov in like 1970, where they merged Marion County and Indianapolis. So like the county government and the city government are one thing. And so there are some like pockets of Marion County that are not technically part of the city of Indianapolis, but by and large, if you're within the county lines of Marion County, you're in Indianapolis, the city. Well, that also becomes important because around the same time they started busing. And so for non-American listeners or people who are from America who aren't familiar with this, basically busing was it was like the last real attempt at like actually using the power of the state to desegregate. And the way they did that was to be like, we're going to ensure a distribution of students so that you don't have like, sort of neighborhoods sorting things out in the way that like it's all white kids in one school and all black kids in another school. And this made white people, like that famous photo of the guy getting beaten up with the American flag by black guy getting beaten with an American flag by white guys in, of course, Boston, city of racist cops. That was a bit more or less a protest that turned into a riot because of busing. That happened in Indianapolis, and Carmel prior to 1970 basically was like it was famous for being the town in America with the first automatic stoplight, but it was basically a farming town. Like, it was small. Like, there are lots of cities, small towns in Hamilton County that are small enough now that that's what Carmel used to be like. Whereas, and the county seat of Hamilton County is Noblesville, and it's nowhere near as big or growing or wealthy or all those things as Carmel, because Carmel literally is the first thing you enter. You cross 96th Street going north, and you're in the city of Carmel, out of the city of Indianapolis, and thereby the magic line crossing north from 96th Street means you're no longer subject to desegregation, basically. So what do you fucking think white people in the Midwest did in the 70s?
Yeah.
And so Carmel exploded, and that's where we moved to. I didn't know any of Carmel's a sundown town unofficially, in terms of like, it wasn't publicly stated, but like, as I understand it, like into the 90s. Carmel police are famous for, if you look, two things. Number one, my anecdotal experience, but the experience I had growing up there, is that anytime you saw the cops pulling somebody over, it was either a teenager, but more likely it was anyone who was black. Like, people that I knew who had family, for example, on the north side of Indianapolis who were black, who lived in Carmel, like their relatives would get stopped, their friends would get stopped all the time. Secondly, and this is, I can't 100% verify this, and I can't imagine Carmel would ever let you, but this was reported in Indianapolis magazine in the early 2000s, I believe, because I remember seeing the citation, seeing the article itself, was that apparently until 1996, I think, there was an official but unpublicized system that if you were black and had non-Hamilton County plates, so 29 was the county code for Hamilton County, there was a thing where you could register with the Carmel police and they would give you a little sticker, like a little keystone sticker or something to put on your license plate or on your bumper, so the cops knew you were a black person with a vetted reason to be in Carmel.
Oh, Jesus.
And they wouldn't pull you over. Because like you had a job working for a business in Carmel. Like I'm dead fucking serious. Like it's that bad. And then in 1994, 5, there was a horrific home invasion murder in Carmel involving a teenage kid who tried to buy weed from some guys in Indianapolis, and they came up and saw the house he lived in, and they went out. It was less of a opportunistic robbery, more of just like someone just doing a sadism freak out and killing these kids, and in a really horrible way. And you can guess the racial dynamics involved. And as a result, it just went into fucking overdrive. So like it was shock. I mean, Indiana's famous for being a racist state, but like fuck me, dude. I mean, Indiana, as we talked about before, was like the only state where the Klan was the government.
Yeah.
In the 20s. I don't
know if I told you my dad, who accidentally went to a Klan rally.
Well, I want to hear that story now.
Yeah, before I was born, I'm the only one that was born in St. Louis. My sister was born in Camdenton, and I think my brother was Kansas City. And we got a lot of time in between all of us. My brother's 17 and a half years older than me. But when they were living in Camdenton, which is southern Missouri, kind of Ozark area, but not fully into the Ozarks. My dad said, he's like, he saw flyers for like a neighborhood, like, hey, what he thought was hey, we're all going to get together and we're going to be neighborly and just, make sure that we're a tight knit community who looks out for each other. Right. And like, when you say that on the surface, wouldn't you all love to be a tight knit community who all like hangs out and knows one another and supports one another? You would say yes. But unfortunately, what he walked into was a KKK meeting, which he immediately turned around and left and was like, well, this is not what I was going. My father has always been a very liberal, very left-leaning person. And thank God, because not all of his siblings are like that.
I mean, none of my parents or their relatives are left-leaning in any way, and it's fucking exhausting.
It's weird.
Just hearing the dumb imaginary bullshit that they...
Yeah. It's weird. My mother is also a very devout Catholic, but she's fairly normal politically as well, too, so...
There are a lot of Catholics who aren't, like the level of religious observance, like juxtaposed with their politics does not track the way that it does with evangelicals or, just mainline Protestants.
It depends on if you were born into it or if you got ratified.
Well, if you're a convert, you're typically fucking insane because that's just like, yeah. And that's not to say that all converts are insane, but there's a certain kind of person who gets into Catholicism because of the hierarchy and the orthodoxy and all the stuff around it. And then like, they are observant Catholics. They've gone through, RCIA and all that stuff, but like, they're not like culturally, they just aren't how like kids I knew who grew up, like I'd say Catholic friends were by and large, like more like socially conscious and aware and if not socially liberal in all ways, like certainly more so than the kids with the equivalent level of religious observance who were going to like the mega churches and stuff, the non-denominational Christian churches. You know what I mean? Like, it's just different. I don't know. Like but then you meet like, there was the joke, the tweet about like, the Catholic who grew up Catholic is just sort of like, yeah, we should help the poor and, help the struggling. And then the Catholic who converted, for online reasons, it's like the X edict of 1492 shows why women shouldn't own shoes or something like that. Like, yeah,
I'm here so that my wife wears gingham dresses and have 17 kids and somehow I can afford all of that. If I went back to some kind of religion, I would probably like beyond like, look, I know there's problems in the Catholic Church. I'm not trying to defend anything, but that we've at least got like a pope that seems semi-normal. And I know most of the moves already. And, it's nice to have something that has a lot of history and a lot of, like when I go and I see like a reliquary and there's just like, we've got a bone of a saint in here. And it's just like, this is the most fucking punk rock ass religion ever. Cause at some, there are look, man, there are points,
right, Charlie Kirk,
all of
Catholicism, the new punk.
Catholicism is the new punk rock. No, it's actually more death metal because like when you have we have a chip of a bone of a saint in our altar and that's what we pray over.
There's definitely like, I've made the comment before that like some of the sort of manifestations of Catholicism in places like southern Italy is almost indistinguishable from just being goth.
Yeah.
Shia Islam is also like that. I've made the joke with my buddy Safin that Shiism is he's Kurdish and he's Sunni, but that like Shiism is like goth Islam. But it's definitely like Catholic Islam. I'm not gonna lie, except for the not to oversimplify it, but like it's funny how everyone talked about this as if it was so inscrutable when we were in the army and getting ready to deploy to these places. But like it literally is, it's the easiest thing in the world. It's a schism that formed based on who would be the caliph. Would it be descended through people who were related to the prophet as a dynasty, or would it be descended as like a public office or like a person basically chosen by people? And literally people of if I remember correctly, like people of a council would be Ahlul al-Sunnah, and so that's literally Sunnis. And then was it Ahlul al-Shia Ali or Ahlul al-Shia Ali? Literally like people of the way of Ali, Muhammad's nephew, I believe. But I can't quite remember. Basically, that's it. That's the split. Is literally, is it hereditary to be the caliph, or is it not hereditary? Is it like an appointed, like a thing that's decided?
Is it blood or is it a vibe?
Yeah, or is it? It's not quite democratic, but it's like like I believe it would be sort of like a religious council electing people. So it's just it's that, but from the before the year 1000 AD. And that's the split. But for some reason, one thing that's really interesting in Shiism is they aren't as strict or hung up on the idea that you can't have, or rather they aren't hung up on the idea as much that a picture, a drawing, a painting of a person is a graven image. Because the more strict interpretations of Sunni Islam are such that you would not display a person, like a picture of a person. It's one of the reasons why Islamic art is very like geometric, but there's not a lot of things like icons and things like that the way there is in Christianity. Whereas in Shiism, that's not the case. And you'll often in Iran, in Iraq, in places with big Shia communities, you'll see like people will have pictures of, I believe it's of Hussein, but it's basically of the major figures of Shiism. And I don't want to say the wrong thing and sound even dumber than I already sound. But typically in the style, it's almost like stark and almost like a Catholic or Christian icon way. And typically also they do emphasize kind of like almost like dark lines under the eyes, like not quite makeup, but you know what I mean? And so it just looks goth. I can't describe it any other way. Also, Sunni Muslims by and large, and in certain places especially, are opposed to tattoos, whereas Shia are not. So like you can have a devout Sunni Muslim who like having a tattoo is absolutely a sign of sort of like contravening, in the same way that technically speaking, if you're being really observant, if you're Jewish and you have a tattoo, you're not supposed to be buried in a Jewish cemetery. Whereas you might have a devout Shia Muslim who's got like a full back piece of like Hussein. You know what I mean? Like genuinely speaking, it's that much of a difference. And yeah, goth Islam is the only way I can describe it. And then you also have, and I'm gonna steal this from my my Trash Future co-host November, who made the point that if someone said we should invent a Muslim Mormonism where Muhammad was technically born in Indonesia, and she was just like, just introduce you to the Ahmadis, who believe that if I remember correctly, there was another prophet after Muhammad. He was born in Pakistan in like the 1800s. So there is basically Muslim Mormonism, is what I'm saying. It's not to rag on the Ahmadis, but rather that that just like you have these moments and movements and such that have taken place in Christianity, you have similar things in Islam. I mean,
when you say Islamic Mormonism, I would think of an Islam that needs to come from America, because Mormonism is such an American.
So American.
It's such an American. Like we need whatever. Like we've already got the Garden of Eden. The Mormon Garden of Eden is in Missouri. So whatever the paradise of American Islam wants to be, maybe it can be in Indiana. We can split paradise.
Yeah, you said we'll create Jannah in Indianapolis.
Yeah, we'll create, what's the
Jannah on the White River.
when they do the Hajj, what are the thing that they run around, the Kaaba. The Kaaba, yeah. The
Kaaba can be in Monument Circle, which is already a circle, and you can just go around it.
Right. Like you can
drive around it now, but I mean you'll make Hajj to Indianapolis, and they got a great airport too, so you know what? They're set up for it already.
Yeah. And American Muslims need a place to Hajj that doesn't require going all the way over, like a lesser Hajj, maybe a Hajj minor that you can do to Indiana to drive around
the idea of like localized Hajj is just like, yeah, you don't want to, go to Saudi Arabia is a long flight, I'm concerned about my CO2 emissions, so
it's problematic
go to Indianapolis
there, it's going to be so full of people. Like, what if you could just like, kind of Hodge at home?
I'm laughing at the idea too when you made the comment about Mormonism being so American. It really truly is, and it's this difficult thing where it's like you don't want to just be kind of punching down at Mormons. I grew up with around a lot of Mormons, and some of my really good friends in New Mexico were Mormon. But like New Mexico in general is very Mormon because it's very close to Utah. The desert Southwest in general is very Mormon, and obviously my dad was an Eagle Scout, so it was really important that my brother and I be Boy Scouts. And at the time, I don't know if this is still the case, but at the time, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints' official youth group for boys was the Boy Scouts of America. So if you were an observant Mormon, you're supposed to be a Boy Scout. You kind of nudged in the direction of being an Eagle Scout, and you have to go on a mission. And so the Boy Scout troop I was in was all Mormons. So, basically every family showed up in a big conversion van with like 9 kids. Like that was normal. Like there had so many Mormon friends from Boy Scouts, and then a few in school, but not that many, but definitely a ton of in Boy Scouts. And like, I'm still friends with them on Facebook. They're extraordinarily nice people, but like the ones I'm still friends with will be pretty frank about like Mormonism's got some problems, like liturgically, organizationally, technically speaking. If I remember correctly, like you kind of weren't allowed to be a Mormon if you were black until like 1978. And John Krakauer wrote a book about these Mormon spree killers called Under the Banner of Heaven. And there's a line in that book that really struck me, and it's not meant to insult Mormons at all, but it's John Krakauer made the point that Mormon fiction authors have often struggled with the fact that to accurately represent Mormonism in fiction presents the issue that readers who are not familiar with it encounter it and assume it's been made up to make fun of Mormons. But it's not. It's accurately representing the experience, and particularly the experience of people, call it mid-century, where the kind of crisis points in Mormonism hadn't broken out, and also it was harder to communicate with people. So people who grew up in these communities were very isolated from what else was happening in the world. They knew about Saturday's Warriors and they knew about fucking Amway, but like they didn't have the internet. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And so I don't know, man, my encounters with Mormonism has made me feel like when I read it, anything in the Book of Mormon, it's like reading, I don't know, like early 19th century sci-fi.
It's like reading some L. Ron Hubbard shit sometimes. Like it reads in a way that's meant to be plausible and seem plausible to the kind of social and scientific understanding of the layperson in like 1830 in America. And it comes across now as just very, very, very strange in my opinion. And like I said, I'm not saying that to punch down. I'm just giving an honest opinion of it. I come from a religion where like they say that this piece of bread literally turns into Jesus's flesh, and also now you eat it, and that's how you're forgiven for sins. I know that I'm not coming from a place where like I can shit talk whatever anybody else's beliefs.
I mean, like one of the mitzvot in Judaism is that you're supposed to wash your hands first thing in the morning when you wake up, because your soul leaves your body at night and it re-enters through the fingers, and as a result, like the impurities collect up in your fingertips. And so in order to make sure that, those impurities from soul travel don't, affect you, and I'm not making this up. I mean, genuinely, like obviously most people don't observe that, but Hasidic people do, because it's part of all the hundreds of things you're supposed to observe in Judaism. Like, quite frankly, like a lot of times, and this isn't meant to be like atheism edgelord shit, but like the stuff that is normalized to us culturally from how we grow up, whether we're religious or not, if you actually stand it up to scrutiny, it winds up being like, wait, why do we do that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is like with Catholicism, it has like 2,000 years of we do this because we've done it. That's how we've always done it
this way. Yeah.
Right. And like after a while, they kind of downplay a lot of the stuff. Like they don't talk about like transubstantiation being the literal body and blood of Christ. They don't mention it in Sunday school. And you go, really? And the teacher's like, yeah, apparently. And then you kind of move on from it because you're all making the like, all right, look, there's some things that we're just going to kind of say, maybe not. Maybe this one is one that we just we have, and we're going to put it over here, but we're not actually going to dig deep into that one. As long as we can still put like hanks of the Mother Mary's hair inside of a giant gold cross and put it on the back of the altar, I'm good. Like as long as we can still do that.
I had a friend who told me one time, and this is interesting, because he said that he had a younger priest who was just like, there was some discussion, he was like basically talking to the sort of boys youth group. He's like, look, a lot of our interpretations of sin, specifically around lust and specifically around masturbation, because you're asking about this, comes from a time when people both didn't hit puberty till later in life because of nutrition, and also were typically married pretty young. It wasn't the way we live now. And like, I'm not saying you have perfect license to do it, but like, you shouldn't keep yourself up at night worrying that you've committed a venal sin if you've done it. Like, it's far more important to be chaste when it comes to other people.
Right.
And I was like, that priest could probably get in trouble for saying that, but that's so much more down to earth, more in accordance with real life than the idea that like, no, you're sin. And then it's weird to me to think like, oh, a priest, hopefully in a not creepy way, can be like, look, let's kind of acknowledge that and all those problems without being like, or not even problems, but just like the reality of it, without being like, oh no, it's great, fucking jack off in public, or also being like, you're going to hell if you do it.
Right. There can be a medium. Look, I was educated by Jesuits in high school, and the Jesuits at least were pretty, and I went to an all boys school. So yeah, it was very much like, look, we know that this is at the top of your mind. It's not that important. Like your masturbation habits are not as important as, are you a good person to other people? Like, and you know, if you are masturbating, like, you know, kind of think about why you are, and, you know, all, you know, doing the religious, like, look, just think about, you know, don't be weird about it. Don't be gross about it. Don't be misogynistic about it. Don't be hateful about it. Don't hate yourself. Don't hate the person that whoever you're thinking about. Don't jerk off if you can, but, you know, also there's other things to be worried about here. So yeah. I always appreciated the Jesuits on that one.
That's so funny, because I don't know that much about the Jesuits. I mean, I know the basic concept of who they are, you know, and the Society of Jesus and all that. But like,
the ones that educated me were fairly normal. So I don't know the full history of the Jesuits, but, you know, we did do a lot of, we had like a whole semester class on the history of the Society of Jesus. Because, you know, but that was freshman year, you know, that's at this point 25 years ago.
Yeah, Jesus. I was thinking about this the other day, that I was talking to a friend of mine from the Army, and I was like, we were roommates for a couple of times, because like when he was getting housing, and then later on he didn't want to rent a place because he went for the officer version of Ranger tryouts and got selected, so he went to Ranger Regiment, and so like it wouldn't have made sense to sign a lease and immediately break it. So he just like lived with me for a while, and I realized the first time he lived with me was 16 years ago. I was just, because it was, early 2008, early in the beginning of 2008, I got to Alaska, and then he showed up like maybe 6-7 weeks later, and we wound up linking up, and like I was just like, Jesus fucking Christ, how has it been that long,
bro? My first deployment was 20 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I went to airborne school 19 years ago this summer. I signed my enlistment contract 19 years ago. I graduated from high school 21 years ago this June. Like, life happens, you know, and you don't feel that different. You don't necessarily, some people do, but you don't always necessarily look that different when you're about to hit 40. And it's like, but you realize, you know, when you actually look at it, how much time has passed. And I don't know. There was one thing I wanted to say that I found. I was going to say, you talking about being raised in religion. If you had to go back to think, it would be Catholicism. And it's interesting for me because my wife was raised Catholic, and she actually refused to be confirmed, or it may have even been younger. I think she may have refused to take her first communion because she had read in New England there was already stuff in the news about some of the Archdiocese of Boston and the abuse scandals this would have been in the late 80s, early 90s. And she was like, when it kind of dawned on her that
I don't want no part of this. Yeah,
the institution was protecting these people. She was like, no, I'm not. Right. It's not happening. Which, I mean, I respect. Yeah, I certainly am not
not defending the Catholic Church itself as a body, but a religion on its own, and the history it has, and reading some of Thomas Aquinas's stuff when I was younger was really great. There's a lot to it, but I understand nowadays it's a large corrupt institute that shields predators and everything. Which, to be fair, it's always has done that. I like the sparkly statues, and I like the, bits of bone inside of glass.
It's weird because Britain has a similar problem, but it's not a Catholic country. It's like a Catholic Protestant country, because Anglicanism it's odd. And I think the thing that makes it odd is not the religion of Anglicanism so much as the fact that the Church of England is the official state religion. Every public school in this country is technically a religious school. every school has to allot time for prayer, even though it's the way it's done is quite different. It's not actually mandated prayer. It's more, they interpret it differently. White English people are among the least religious people in the developed world, but like the state is officially religious. The king is the head of the church. Everything kind of from the institutions is related to that. Like, so it's very, very weird in the sense that like there is a lot of pageantry left over, and there's a pretty big culture of the sort of hierarchy protecting people who are, in the inner circle from, facing consequences for their actions, especially when it comes to the specific kind of abuse we're talking about. But yeah, it's weird. It's like, it's not a Catholic country at all. It's very Protestant, but it is like Catholic light makes more sense to me now, seeing this.
Yeah.
But also they never had a revolution like a lot of the, the Western European Catholic countries did.
Yeah.
They never have. I mean, they had the English Civil War, but then they restored the monarchy afterwards. And the guy who killed the king and, or took over for a while was basically a Puritan, and was a huge fucking piece of shit and like committed a genocide in Ireland. So like, it's not as if he was better. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it's not even, he's such a piece of shit. You can't even say critical support for ending the monarchy because like he's that much of an asshole. It's Oliver Cromwell. And so
you don't get points for ending the monarchy by starting a new monarchy that is worse.
Yes, or doing a theocracy.
Yeah.
Like, quite frankly, hilariously, the city that I'm going to be moving to was also a Protestant theocracy at one point, because it was a city state, and it was literally, they were burning people at the stake, like in like John Calvin, like Calvinism, like literally Jean Calvin, like he literally was the sort of theocratic ruler of Geneva when it was the Republic of Geneva as a city-state. It's wild, yeah. I mean, so you know what?
Religious history hour.
Yeah, as my Catholic friend used to say, who would be like, yeah, you know what? It's not gays who are destroying marriage; it's Protestants. But I feel like everyone's got their hands in it. Do we have time to do an Ask a Dad?
Yeah, we can do one real quick. Okay, so this one, how do you keep yourselves from making the same mistakes your parents did?
Oh boy, that's a good one.
Yeah, that's kind of a, like, you have to think, well, what mistakes did my parents make? The thing is that as a father, you're gonna realize that, like, you're going to say, here's the mistakes I'm not going to make, and you're going to make completely new, interesting ones that are also like, your kid's not going to grow up to be like, oh, this is, everything is hunky dory. I've never had a bad memory in my entire life. There's going to be, like, I have weird core memories that, like, if I bring him up to my dad, he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Just because what stuck with me is not necessary. And again, my father didn't hit me or anything like that. It would just be something where he yells at me and it's like, yeah, I kind of fucking deserved it. I was being a dumbass. But like those core memories I keep in mind. So I'm like, all right, I'm not going to do these things. But then, you find yourself kind of doing your own things. Like, one thing that I have really been pushing back, my wife has been really great about this too, about having screen-free Saturdays. We don't have our no tablets, no phones.
So actually, technically, you're doing Shabbat, so you're Jewish now.
Yeah,
Baruch Hashem.
So, but yeah, we do physical books only, or your Kindle. She's got a Kindle, and that has really helped with I stare too much at my phone, and I'm not paying enough attention to my wife and kid. And like, I find if I'm on my phone too much, I get surly when somebody's like interrupting me from Twitter of all fucking things. So. Those are mistakes that I realizing I have made, and I'm trying to do better with them. But, at the same time, with like, what did my parents do that was so wrong is some of the things that I find myself doing at times. And I think, okay, I need to be a little bit more present. I need to be less distant. I need to be just better about being around, So how about you, Nate?
I mean, obviously my daughter is so young that, it's kind of early days on things, but I have a different situation in that, like, I mean, a lot of there's just a lot of stuff that, that I wouldn't want to talk about in a public forum, but like, I have a relationship with my parents, but like, given some of the stuff would be surprising to some people that we have a relationship. But I mean, I've just found that it's easier to have one than not. And there's things that are important to me. I would say I've got a lot of stuff to go off of to what not to do. But I think the thing that is, I mean, because a lot of that stuff, when you look at it now, and specifically, now in the context also of, 30 plus years later, when it comes to how people approach parenting, some of that's going to be pretty obvious. But I think for me, there are things where I realize now that I hope that my daughter never has the feeling that there was ever a time in her life when I was completely disinterested in her to the point where I just didn't know anything about her. like kids are going to grow up and they develop their own private lives and stuff like that. And, you know, it's a kind of graduated process. But the idea that you didn't know anything about them, my dad, one of the rare instances of him kind of breaking ranks, my mom got mad at my dad because I want to say for my 14th birthday, my dad got me a wooden picture frame. My mom was like, he's 14. What the fuck are you like, my dad he just didn't know anything that I was interested in and didn't really seem to care to know. And so, like, I mean, recently it happened. It was a couple of years ago. And it's a funny story, but there's kind of a unhappy kind of underside to it, which is my dad texted me out of the blue and he was like, have you ever heard of this band called Green Day? He's like, heard this song Time of Your Life and it's great. I was wondering, like, yeah, have you heard it? And I was like, yes, I've heard of them. They were my favorite band from the age of 11 through 13. They were all I ever listened to. The album that's on, I got when it first came out when I was 13. It's the album Nimrod. And I played it all the time, front to back. I'm sure you heard it. And I didn't say that to him at the time. And it was actually longer to realize that. And I was like, well, obviously people forget stuff, but also I'm like, wow, you really didn't know me at all back then.
And that's so weird for like a dad and son. Like one thing that so
listeners can't see this, but I just made the world's biggest shrug your shoulders at Francis.
Yeah, I know. Well,
like shrugging your shoulders like you're fucking Atlas holding up the world kind of gesture.
Yeah, that's just, I mean, look, it's insane to me to think of somebody being that disinterested in their kid in general, but like
the times in my life when I was perhaps foolhardy enough to approach them about those things to try to talk about it, the response was so uniformly negative of both, it's either crying and how can you say this? We tried the best we could, blah, 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 or that didn't happen, or I don't remember that. And no matter what, I come out of it with no positive outcome. Right. You
get no closure from that.
But I'm made to feel as though I'm a bad person for having brought it up. And also, I recently got the, rare materia version of, actually, it did happen and it was good and it was funny that it happened. It's just one of those things where I realized that there's just no point in having those discussions, and there won't ever be. And unfortunately, that's just a thing. And I'm still obviously their son, and I'm still like devoted to them. There's things I have to do for them. Some things they just don't want. They don't care. They don't want me to do for them. So I'll just take my cues from them. But I think, how do I not make the same mistakes my parents made? Well, there's the big long list of just don't do that stuff. But then there's also, I think, things where it's very easy to slip into the tendency of like not paying attention and not caring. Like, oh, it's not that important that I do this. It's not important that I, give thoughtful gifts. It's not important that I stay in touch with people and all this stuff. And it's just, I don't want to be like that. Like, my parents don't really have very many close friends. And most of it's not because they're not friendly or sociable people. They just don't put in the effort for friendships. And it's very easy, I feel like, to get into that, especially later in life, and then be like, it's not like people are mad at you, but like you don't make time for them. So of course they aren't going to keep being persistent, trying to make time for you. And so, I mean, that's like I said, that's the G-rated version, I suppose.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us on the Catholicism Radio Hour. Hopefully better than the Catholicism Radio hours that I had to listen to as a kid.
I was going to say, I was going to say Father Coughlin Radio Hours, like Father Coughlin, like not racist version, not anti-Semitic, not fucking, fascist.
My wife and I were actually talking about, we used to have a Larry Rice TV station in St. Louis, the channel 24, I think. And it had like the most insane commercials. They didn't have regular like commercials for themselves. It was like, how the armed forces, AFN makes their own.
Yeah, the public service announcement commercials. Yeah. Oh God, dude, I have some of those burned into my brain from fucking being a kid in Germany in the early 90s. Like, I can recite them from memory.
I actually got to serve in the same office as one guy who was in one. The thing came on. He's like, my God, please don't make us watch this. And we know we all have to. He was the PAO guy.
Hi, Mr. T. How are you? Well, I've been feeling a lot more colorful lately since I started visiting the Robertson Barracks Arts and Crafts Center. Fucking, I'm dead serious.
We used to be a country, Nate.
Robertson Barracks is in Germany.
I know. But it was American TV.
It was very American, yes.
Yes. You can get all kinds of extra bonus content at patreon.com/hellofaWayToDie. We've got the store. We've got all kinds of other bonus content. We
put the episodes up on YouTube, so if you have people who you think might be interested in the show but are YouTube consumers only, you can get the episodes there. And obviously, like, all of our bonus content is on the $5 tier on Patreon, dating all the way back to 2017. So there's a lot of episodes out there. We got Zoo Crew, we've got movie stuff, things we do with Joe. Our Discord is a benefit of being a member, and you You share it with Lions Led by Donkeys, so there's lots of interesting stuff happening there, and there's lots of stuff if you want more from us.
We're here. We are here to give slop to the hogs as much as possible. Nate, thank you thank you for joining. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Take care.